It's been 10 years since Donald Trump came down that golden escalator and launched his campaign for president. For Washington media, the age of Trump has proved to be challenging, unnerving, and rewarding. Trump and the MAGA movement have made the traditional media their targets, even as we confront radical changes in the way Americans get their news, if they get news at all. The future is here, and tonight we'll give you a tour. Next.
This is Washington Week with The Atlantic. Corporate funding provided by Consumer Cellular. Additional funding is provided by Koo and Patricia Ewan through the Ewan Foundation, committed to bridging cultural differences in our communities. Sandra and Carl DeLay Magnuson, Rose Herschel and Andy Shreves, Robert and Susan Rosenbaum, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you. Once again, from the David M. Rubenstein studio at WETA in Washington, Editor-in-Chief of The Atlantic and moderator, Jeffrey Goldberg.
Good evening, and welcome to a special edition of Washington Week. Our subject tonight is the future of the media, Washington media, corporate media, all media. And my guest is one of the great analysts and interpreters of our communications future, Kara Swisher. She is the host of the podcast On with Kara Swisher and the co-host of Pivot. And she's great, and I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The future of media.
The future, you are.
All right.
You are the future of media.
I'm kind of old for that.
You know what the future of media is?
What?
Washington Week with The Atlantic.
Oh, okay.
That's yeah,
all right.
I just,
okay.
you heard it here first
good.
and possibly
yeah,
last.
TV numbers are...
No, we're good.
Okay.
We're good.
All right.
Everybody
Okay.
at home, we're
All
good.
right. Okay.
We're
All
great.
right.
All right, Kara. First things first, let's talk about Donald Trump and his relationship to the media. I want you to watch something, actually, before we go into this. This is Trump just the other day.
These networks and these cable networks are real losers. You're gutless losers. I say that to CNN because I watch it. I have no choice. I got to watch that garbage. It's all garbage. It's all fake news.
So the large question is, 10 years, what have you learned about Washington media in particular by watching Washington media cover Trump? But, you know, the specific question on that is, what is he doing there? What's this performance about?
Well, this is a lot of his old performances. He does a lot of oldies, and he's very good at them. You know, he's. I think here it's interesting. He's talking about cable and calling them losers, and yet he can't stop talking about them, which says more about Donald Trump than about cable. He's right, in fact, that cable's gone down precipitously, and that viewers are going elsewhere and everything else. But he has a fixation on it, and I would say that would be a weakness of his. But in the case of people covering him, they don't understand what a phenomena he is from a media point of view. You don't love to give Donald Trump a compliment some of the time, but he's really good at media, or the new media, almost by accident, but also intuitively.
Right. So when he's going after CNN, is he really angry at CNN, or is that a professional wrestling performance?
Well, you've been in that situation
that
where he
is
said,
true.
right?
That is true.
What's the first thing he said to you? I'm going to get your ratings up. Everything is about ratings for Donald Trump and about performance and performative behavior. Like, we obliterated them. Like, they didn't obliterate them, but he felt he had to say it, and so he sets the tone. And he does understand, again, in a lizard brain that he has here, because I wouldn't say he's modern in terms of, he's somewhat of a Luddite when it comes to technology, but he does understand how it moves through the system. And he has always done that, whether it was way back in the day when he did The Apprentice or to now. He is the one who really has. Everyone thought Obama was the digital president, but this is the guy who is.
That's interesting. You think Trump is better at digital than Barack Obama?
Yes, yeah. He understands the nature of it, the virality, the posting, the ability to get things going and then move on to the next
The domination of the cycle.
The domination, or just the spectacle of it. He does understand it, and he understands the speed of it. And the word they use is snackable moments. That's what he does really well. And then you move on, and then the media, the older media, is caught here, like, looking at what he said, but he's gone on to the next thing.
You know what's so interesting about this is we talked about this when I was on your podcast in the Signal controversy.
Right.
What I asked him, what did you learn from that, or why did you think that I was, quote, successful? That's what he posted in the Signal moment, and he said, well, because you got a lot of attention.
Right.
It wasn't that we plugged a gap in the national security communications apparatus. It was like
Good job on that.
It was like it was that the news cycle didn't belong to him for several hours, and whoever can take the news cycle away from him gets his kind of attention.
It was a good on you. It was like you created a moment and a viral moment, and so he understands virality better than almost any politician.
Well, talk about the Washington press corps and take us from the escalator moment when we're dealing with this. Because remember, the escalator moment was also the Mexican rapist moment. That was when, we're going there?
Yes.
And so take us through this and give me your analysis. How well is the Washington media writ large doing, the mainstream traditional media?
Badly, if following him. Yes, I think some of it. No, some of the people that are doing the investigative stuff, they're doing their job great. They uncovering it. The question is, how much do people actually care? And that's a very different discussion to be having. But one of the things that when he came down that escalator, I tell this story a lot, but I was at a Washington party. It was a barbecue, and everyone was making fun of him. Like, oh, how silly, this is so silly. I had watched all The Apprentices. I liked The Apprentice. I thought it was a good show. I knew it was wrestling. I got it. It was not really business, and he isn't a very good business person, but it hardly mattered. It was a good story. And I said, oh, I don't know, I think he's kind of appealing. And they were like, oh, it's ridiculous, he's a clown. I'm like, yeah, but I like him, and I'm a lesbian from San Francisco. Like, what does that say? I have liberal leanings. And it was interesting that they didn't take the seriousness of what he was aspirational. He looked like a business person. He was people's version of a rich person. And he played the part really well. And I think they tried to pretend that didn't matter, so much so that, if you remember, the Huffington Post put him in the entertainment section. And I got in an argument with her. I'm like, no, he has sense of humor. He's got speed. He does understand digital really well, intuitively at the very least. Maybe he is, covfefe, whatever.
Yeah.
But he does understand.
He's not great at spelling or typing, which is, by the way, weirdly part of the charm.
Right, exactly. But it doesn't matter. He's into it, and he does understand the speed and virality. And that's when everything started to change with Twitter, which was it used to be about context, speed for sure, the internet, and getting the right thing. Google.
So if you were the czar of all mainstream media,
yes, that's
which
illegal
you're not,
in this country. Yep.
but if you were, and you were in charge of telling the mainstream newspapers, the networks, CNN, The Atlantic, The New Yorker, et cetera, the wire services, this is the way you should cover Donald Trump. This would be the way to do it. What would that way be?
I think you have to, look, there's a part for investigative reporting, which is very different, right? It is. Like, you have to look at the, accountability journalism is critical. And reporting is the best way to handle it. Like, he says this is what happened. He says this. But one of the things they were doing is they sort of lived in this. I remember being in the biggest argument with a Washington Post editor about the word lie. They wouldn't use the word lie. They were living in a different era than this guy was. And so I was like, he's lying. And they're like, yeah, we can't say lie because we don't know his intent. I'm like, well, then you've already lost the thing. He is. And one of the difficulties is sort of saying what was happening. They were assuming everything was the same rules applied. And it didn't with this guy, because he was able to go around them. They hardly mattered, especially with the people that voted for him.
Right. So let me ask you this. Is trust in the mainstream media low because of Trump's attacks?
No.
Or because we're bad at our jobs? Or both? Or something else entirely?
I don't pay a lot of attention to that, because trust in the media has always been bad, going back to revolutionary times. I mean, like, sorry, they jailed journalists then. They didn't like journalists was an ick profession. There was only a period of time when we were heroes, which is during Watergate. And so media love has not been a great big thing for a long, long time. I do think one of the things is we don't look at media as a little bit like product. We're not making things people want to consume. And there are ways to look at the Atlantic. You're growing like crazy. Why is that? It's not because you're doing like viral videos. I don't see Jeff Goldberg like Mr. Beast burying himself in 6 feet of earth and seeing what happens. Like,
although that's not a bad idea.
I think it's a great idea. You're making products people want to buy. And I think that's got lost among the media, not understanding the financial dynamics, for sure, which was that Facebook and Google were sucking up all the oxygen in advertising and not shifting fast enough in that regard, and still making the same. It was like butter churns. I kept going, when I was at the Washington Post, I was like, we're making butter churns. Like, nobody wants a butter churn. Like, And
You felt that at the Washington Post?
I did. And then at the Wall Street Journal, which is why I kept creating all these entrepreneurial, digital forward things first. At one point when I was writing, I remember at the Journal, I was writing up earnings. And I was like, why am I doing this? Why am I spending this many minutes of my life writing something a computer could do? And a computer will do it. And they were like, well, we have to write the earnings. I'm like, yes, but I'm not adding. There was nothing additive to what I was doing.
It was just matching things that 10 other people were doing.
We also didn't, one of the things we did, I think, pioneer at our different sites that we did, All Things D and Recode, was we were telling you what was happening. And you all do that very well at The Atlantic. I did a story about Webvan, and I did the reporting, and I wrote, this is a disaster, right? This is a disaster. And an editor came to me and said, well, you need to have someone else say that. I'm like, yeah, but I did the reporting, and I can do math. It's a disaster. We should just say it. And then the reader trusts us more because they're taking we've done the work. Reported analysis is valuable to people. Right. And they're like, well, you need to get someone else to say it. And also you need to say, some people say, it's going to go well. And I was like, nobody intelligent says that. Why should we do that? And I think readers really trust people who, one, tell them after doing reporting what they think happened, and then secondly, being right later. And I think that's one of the things. But being right later depends on the reporting you do at the top of it.
Right. Let me ask you, since we both started our professional careers more or less at the Washington Post, which was a juggernaut, and I think we both have very fond feelings and memories of the Washington Post. Jeff Bezos, who bought it a number of years ago, did fine as an owner through the first Trump
sort of. I don't
term.
agree with that, but
well, okay, then we can pick apart that in a second. But he had Marty Baron as editor, and they held the Trump team to account, just like you would hold any administration to an account. And then something changed. You are the anthropologist of the billionaire tech bro elite. What happened at the Washington Post over the last 3 or 4 years?
I don't think he prepared for post-Trump. I think he wasn't involved, and he should have been involved, actually, a little more involved. And I think what they did is they sort of rode on the Trump entertainment train. And then they did, and then you saw the New York Times add Wordle. When they did Wordle, everyone sort of laughed at it. I'm like, oh, good idea. That's a great idea. Like, daily use was something you want people to do in some fashion, along with the other stuff. But you could see news at the New York Times was sort of doing this. It wasn't doing this. You had to start to bring in other things. And the Post used to be really good at that. Ben Bradley introduced the style section, the food section. They were so innovative in terms of their product, and Bezos never innovated. That was my feeling, by not being around, because he could care less.
There's another side of this, which is that now he seems to be giving in to demands of the Trump administration. How do you explain that part?
Because he wants things. Because during the first one, remember, it was the Washington Post, Bezos, remember, they kept affiliating. He started not getting contracts of things that he actually cared about, which was space travel, things to do with his other companies, Blue Origin, possibilities of attacks on Amazon. Those are the things he actually cares about. I don't think he could care less about the media, honestly.
But you really don't think, going back to your dissent before, you don't think that he did a good job in his early years as owner of the Washington Post?
I think he didn't. I think he staying away is always a good thing, but staying away is a bad thing. He never innovated, and he has innovative ideas, and he never did innovative things during that period of time that the New York Times did. So I look at the New York Times and I look at them. They had every opportunity to do the same thing, and a better owner, by the way, who did understand where things were going digitally. It's fine, but they didn't do anything to take advantage of the next thing or whatever. You
surprised at all by the behavior of some of the network giants?
No.
You know where I'm going with this question. Yeah. Why aren't you surprised?
Because their interests have always been for shareholders. And now when they're in distress because of tech companies, which has taken away their businesses and hollowed out, like, ABC is a shadow of itself. So is CBS. It's lovely that someone like David Ellison wants to own it, but it's only because he has a rich dad, right? It's not a business that's growing. And maybe he could make it one, but at this point it's not. And so they're under enormous pressure from a business point of view, from everything being taken away, like by the tech giants. Mm-hmm. And now they have to protect what they have with shareholders. And so, no, there's no plus for them as a CEO, especially if you're paid for the stock price or cutting costs to get in a fight with the Trump administration.
What about your everlasting soul?
Well, yes, there's that.
I mean, no, and I'm not.
I'm sorry.
I'm not joking. You know, it's like at the end of your life, don't you want to
Absolutely.
don't you want to be remembered as a Kay Graham and not as, I don't know, someone who just gave in to power?
Maybe if you were in an industry that was growing, maybe you would. But when you're in an industry that's diminishing and that it could mess up your other businesses, everything is about shareholder value, including with the tech guys. Why do you think they were sitting in the front row? Do you think they love Trump? A little bit, not very much. He's useful to them. And they're definitely useful to him.
Let's talk about delivery systems, because you spend a lot of time thinking about this, and we're doing this on linear TV, although you can see us on YouTube and everywhere else. Are there journalism values of PBS, the New York Times, the Atlantic, CBS, et cetera, AP, Reuters? Are these transferable to the platforms that you're very comfortable with?
Absolutely, we're growing like crazy. Like I do hour-long interviews. I just did one on Iran this morning. Like we do substantive things. It's the issue is understanding the product you're making. Like journalists don't like to think of it like that, but it's the news business, right? You have to make money at it, and so you have to figure out: should you make money through advertising? Should you do subscription? Should you do merchandise? Should you do events? So one of the things I did when I started is I had an event business. I had advertising. I had we were looking for lots of different revenue streams. Right. It just you have to figure out what the right one is. The other thing is the idea that young people only want tiny little silly things is not true. They watch substantively, but it just depends on where they're watching. And like PBS is a really good example. My son, I was doing a thing for one of the big PBS shows, and my son called me during it, and I'm like, oh, I'm doing this taping, and he said, oh, I love that show. I watch it all the time. And I was like, oh, you watch PBS? And he goes, no, I watch YouTube. What's the difference? There's not a difference. YouTube is television now, and if you aren't hurtling towards it at this point, and someday it won't be, but if you aren't hurtling towards YouTube right now, you're making an enormous mistake as a media company. Right.
So for you, quality, attention span, all these issues are platform agnostic when it comes to these.
Correct.
I mean, that's the most hopeful thing I've heard in a while, the idea that young people actually have attention spans, which I think is what you're suggesting. They just have attention spans for good things.
They're very discerning media people. It's just, let's make things that they like. They do pay attention. They do like longer things. I think it's just a question of we spent a lot of time on the distribution system. And when I was at the Washington Post, I'm like, when I started covering AOL, which I was the first reporter to do that, I thought, everything that can be digitized will be digitized. So why are we doing this thing with the paper? I never understood it. And when I went to the Wall Street Journal, we were in one of those meetings, and you've been in 100 of these, like, how do we get young people to read the newspaper? And it's all old people in the room, which is my favorite part. And I happened to have been a young person at the time. And I put up my hand, and they seldom invited me to meetings for this. And I go, well, tape a joint between every page. I don't know, something like that. And they're like, that's not funny. I'm like, no, it is.
No,
it's
that's
actually,
funny.
That's a good idea, because they're not reading the print paper. So give it to them. If they want to eat it, put it on salami and give it to them. Like, what do you care? And I think that's what has happened.
I wouldn't put a joint in every page, because that could run up your costs a lot. How do we? Let's talk about AI, because it's another area that you're thinking about all the time. How do we keep AI? We're heading to an election, obviously, 28. How do we keep AI fakery from just totally tsunamiing our understanding of reality?
I have to say, I pay a lot of attention to AI now. Look what the damage the internet has done. Look at the damage, and this is the internet on steroids.
Wait, stop. Just go back to this. Right. What is just define the damage that the internet has done to politics or discourse? The ability
for malevolent players to screw with people, like, all the time. Like the information flood. Before, we used to have an information desert with a lot of people. We did. People didn't have a lot of choices.
Right.
Maybe a local station. Now they have a flood. And so that's just as bad as a desert. Like, either way, it's not a good thing. And so with AI, you can really do things. And on the good part, you could solve cancer, maybe. On the bad part, on the interesting part, you like The West Wing? We're going to make you 10 10 more episodes, 10 more seasons. We don't even need to find the actors anymore. That's kind of cool. Like,
Explain how that would work.
oh, they'd feed the show. The show has 7, 8 seasons, whatever it is. You feed it in and you make it again.
Right. You tell the AI, just go make a new season.
And I would like there to be more this. I would like this to happen.
Right.
There's all kinds of things. But it could also create all kinds of confusion, especially around video. Initially everyone was like, oh, it's got 6 fingers or 3. Well, today it does, but go back and look at early internet websites.
Right.
You know, the biggest, most popular website at the beginning of the internet was a camera pointed at a coffee pot that was making coffee.
Right.
We're way beyond that. And you couldn't have, what you have to do is anticipate what you can't anticipate. Could you have anticipated when the App Store started, Uber? Maybe. Nobody,
somebody did, and then they got rich.
But at the beginning, you didn't.
Right.
Like, you didn't know. And so you could see all kinds of really interesting media applications for AI. You could also see easily dangerous ones.
What would you do to stop the coming wave of unreality that could affect, look, on the American domestic level, it can affect our politics and maybe violence at the
100%.
margins, but we just saw Mountain Head. I think that's what it's called.
Mountain Head.
Mountain Head.
I interviewed Jesse, who was successful. He also.
Yeah. I mean, which is great, and it wasn't as crazy and satirical. It kind of felt like, oh, these are things that could happen. You could foment large-scale violence by the introduction of fake video. How does it stop? How does it not?
One of the great lines in that was like, well, you got something funny like Snoopy with a giant penis. Remember that? Or you have this. And what was interesting about that movie is there was a guy in it who was the good AI guy, right?
Right.
But was he so good? Because what he said is, what would you feel like if information cancer was there and you had the cure? He was more interested in the money he could make doing it. And so the question is, should we put, there's ways to follow this video to make sure it's real. Should we legislate that? That's the kind of stuff our legislators should be and are not thinking about whatsoever. But they did no legislation against tech companies. They let them run rampant across our media. They let them run rampant across our politics. And these are digital arms dealers in a very clear way, and we never did anything about it, and we're not going to under this administration.
You know these people better than almost any reporter. Any sense that they know that they're riding a very wild horse and that they have to get this under control before an election goes sideways?
They don't care. I wish you would understand that. Everyone's like, how could they? I'm like, they don't care. They're interested in shareholder value, and you must understand. I know you're down with the soul thing. They don't care, and they don't think they're to blame. By the way, they think people are to blame. They think cable is to blame. The media is to blame. They're the biggest blame throwers. They're just making stuff, and however people use it, it's sort of the guns don't kill people, people kill people.
Well, it's like it's the drug dealer analogy. Is if they want to, I mean, I can't control if somebody wants drugs.
Of course you can.
Right.
Of course you can. And one of the things is they've never been subject to any regulation, and the regulation they've been subject to is helpful to them. Section 230. They can do whatever they want. And let me tell you, sometimes that leads to great things. Sometimes it leads to precisely.
You know this amazing E.O. Wilson line, the primatologist, the evolutionary biologist. He says that the central challenge of our age is we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology.
Right, exactly.
And so that's what we're heading into.
But they're also rich. That is the part you're not figuring in. These people are. I'm waiting.
You could fund your technology.
Right. It's. They have now power. They were not interested in Washington. I had Bill Gates to the Washington Post once, and he's like, "Ugh, Washington." Like he used to be like that. I don't have a lobbyist here. He was in front of Mrs. Graham, the rest, and those lunches they used to have upstairs. Oh, I don't care about Washington. They care about Washington, which is why they're here buying, the coin-operated president.
Right. There's so much to talk about. We have time for one more question. Okay. It's a little bit of an impossible one, but try anyway. 10 years from now, how do you think we're going to be getting our information? Obviously, Washington Week and The Atlantic and your podcasts, but put those aside.
No, I'll be dead probably.
You're not going to be dead. You're very healthy.
I'll be old.
We're all going to be older.
Right.
How are we getting information?
I do think there's a real business for good information and really good reporting. I don't think that ever changes. I really don't.
That's the interesting thing about Substack, by the way. There's not a lot of reporting on it.
No, there's not. but there's interesting insight into part. But that doesn't mean you can't still make a business. You know, to me, you run toward where people have a need, and they have a need for great and good information. And I think that doesn't change. You do have to understand is the delivery. You're going to get everything in your eyes. You're going to be wearing things. They're not going to look like they're a little heavy right now, but everything will be. If you see one movie, watch Minority Report. That was done. They had consultants that I think were brilliant in terms of where things were going. Everything will be monitored, surveilled. They'll know when you walk in. They'll know what you want, and that's that to me. And so make good products rather than bad ones. They'll sell just as well, but the bad products will also, just like Twinkies do, be very popular.
We're going to have to leave it there for now. Your assignment at home is to watch Minority Report. I want to thank you all for watching. I want to thank Kara for joining us. And you could watch Washington Week with The Atlantic anytime on YouTube or online at pbs.org/Washington Week. I'm Jeffrey Goldberg. Good night from Washington.
Corporate funding for Washington Week with The Atlantic is provided by
In 1995, two friends set out to make wireless coverage accessible to all. With no long-term contracts, nationwide coverage, and 100% U.S.-based customer support. Consumer Cellular. Freedom calls.
Additional funding is provided by Koo and Patricia Ewan for the Ewan Foundation, committed to bridging cultural differences in our communities. Sandra and Carl DeLay Magnuson, Rose Herschel and Andy Shreves, Robert and Susan Rosenbaum, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.